They had intentionally cropped out black people from the cover of the magazine. You could read the disdain.
Even the way the photos are taken.
How dare they like Donald Trump? How dare they wear a MAGA hat? Everyone on the right is boring, self-righteous, pretentious, annoying. They're racist, they're bigoted, they hate women, they hate gays, all of these things. And that's just not true in Trump's Republican Party.
I don't know if you saw this Jubilee interview with Medhi Hasan.
I am an immigrant. I'm speaking from past experience.
Get the hell out.
I don't even like...
I was supposed to be on that episode, and now I'm looking at the episode, I'm like, thank God.
I voted for none of this. He's doing the exact opposite of everything I voted for.
I'm weary of non-Republicans trying to dictate the direction of our party.
Do you think they fundamentally believe in anything?
Mr. President, have you spoken to Elon Musk? What happened there?
Look, welcome to the party, but you're a guest.
It does sound a little bit defensive.
They said that we were vying for cultural dominance. We're not vying for it anymore.
What does that mean?
I don't know what it means. I think in their eyes it was something that was nefarious and evil. But actually, honestly, we are.
You made your first video speaking out against Obama when you were 12 years old.
Yeah.
You're 22.
Yeah.
In that 10 years, a lot has changed.
Mm-hmm.
Last year, you threw this insane party, which caught the attention of New Yorker for all the wrong reasons.
Yeah.
On 4th of July, you threw an all-white party. My question to you is, in culture and counterculture today, where do you think the right lies?
I think we're in a position of dominance. You know, it's so interesting. In that New York Magazine article where they sought to depict us as just the most terrible, cruelest people to ever walk the earth, even though the only crime that we had committed was being young, conservative people who loved America, they said that we were vying for cultural dominance. We're not vying for it anymore.
What does that mean?
I don't know what it means. I think, you know, in their eyes, it was something that was nefarious and evil. But actually, honestly, we are vying for cultural dominance. But I think we're past the point of vying for it. I think we've achieved it. I don't think it's ever been a cooler time in America right now to be a conservative. You know, you see so many celebrities now who are so unafraid and unapologetic to finally just, you know, stand on business, speak up for what they believe in. And I think it's something that's long overdue. I think that on November 5th, 2024, the obituary for cancel culture was written by the results of this election. We won not only the Electoral College, as we did in 2016, but we won the popular vote, the first Republican president to do so in many, many years. I think that was the beginning of a sea change, not only in how conservatives perceived themselves, but how the world perceived us as well.
Let's contextualize this based on what it used to be.
Yeah.
Because I used to work in conservative media back when the saying was conservatives are not good at media.
Yeah.
Pretty sure you remembered that landscape. Yeah. Can you just paint the picture what conservative media / culture looked like back in the day? Because I remember going to CPAC events where like there were like weirdos making Ben Carson paintings and just walking around. I remember those days very vividly.
We have come a long way, and thank God for it. You know, when I got started, you know, in this movement, I was 12 years old, so I wasn't necessarily in the CPAC circuit or going to many of those events because I frankly wasn't old enough to drink back then. I was drinking lots of apple juice, and I still love a good lemonade. So, but you know, it's been interesting to see a change. I think that, you know, President Trump, I think actually was the catalyst for that change, because I think, you know, for a while, you know, you had folks like Mitt Romney and John McCain, and I think everyone was desperately trying to make them cool. You can't make those people cool. There's nothing cool about Mitt Romney. There's nothing cool about John McCain. There's not many things cool about many Republicans, actually, unfortunately, who are on the national stage. But Donald Trump is an enigma. And I think he is a candidate who not only understood politics really well in the moment that he was running in, but he understood culture. And he's always taken that, you know, approach first. You know, I think what people sometimes forget about this president, but this before he was, you know, the transformational president that he was a celebrity. He was, you know, hanging out with Mike Tyson. He was friends with all of the rappers and the models and all of these things. He was that guy. He was him. And and I think that he still is, but I think that we've kind of reached this point now where the party and the movement kind of realizes like the importance of aesthetics. Like when you look at the cover of that New York Magazine article, I think the reason that it was, you know, kind of the cultural moment that it became was because you see all of these young, hot, healthy people just smiling and having fun, even despite the fact, like, these people are trying to make them all look bad in that photo. But what they actually accidentally did was make them look like badasses. And so I think when you see a photo like that, you think to yourself, I want to be in that room with those people because they're having fun. They love America. And you don't see that on the left. You see them wearing vaginas on their head, running around, you know, angry all the time, screaming at the world. And that's not what you see at these events, which is, I think, what we've been able to really do differently. I think that for a long time, I think the Republican Party and the movement, our entire social scene was centered around receptions. It was very country club.
Policy.
Yeah. Policy summits. And I love policy. I think there's a time and place for it. But I also think, it's important for conservatives, especially in the belly of the beast, like cities like DC and New York, to know one another and to actually know that they're not an enigma. There's no stigma around being MAGA anymore. And sometimes you got to get people in the same room because courage is contagious.
Let's stay on that for a second because you said the vibes is important, basically, let's call it. Why is the vibes and just the visual grammar of how Republicans come off in capital C culture at large important? And why, for the longest time, did they not play that game?
Yeah, I think it's incredibly important. I think people want to feel as if they're a part of a movement that's ascendant because no one wants FOMO. Yeah. And I think that right now, conservatism has never been more culturally ascendant than it is right now, right? And so I think that when we have, great aesthetics, when we're seeing people or showing people who are young, relatable, and are, proud to be MAGA, other young people kind of view it as a permission slip because I think for a long time they had been told, by the left, by the media, that everyone on the right is boring, self-righteous, pretentious, annoying, they're racist, they're bigoted, they hate women, they hate gays, all of these things. And that's just not true in Trump's Republican Party. This is a president who rolled out the welcome mat to folks like the Nelk Boys during the campaign. Sat down with Theo Vaughn, Joe Rogan, Andrew Schultz. He went to meet voters where they were. And again, I think that enough credit cannot be given to this president and his incredible team. Folks like Alex Bruschwitz, who played a big part in that. And of course, the incredible leadership of Susie Wiles and Chris LaCivita. They understood the moment and the time that we were in a way that others on the left still don't understand. Alex Cooper and Kamala Harris had the opportunity to do an actually really incredible thing. Yeah. But instead of going on and talking about herself and actually kind of retaking a narrative that had been going around about her, many people, oftentimes mention Willie Brown when they're talking about Kamala Harris, and not in a flattering way. Yeah. But what other place to address that would have been better than call her daddy, where she could have kind of taken this feminist stance and said, all of these people want to accuse me of sleeping my way to the top. Many professional women have been accused of the same thing. That would have been a rallying cry. But what did she go on, call her daddy, and talk about? Abortion, an issue that everyone on that show agrees with her with already. And so I think if you compare that to what Trump did, he went on Theo Vaughn and he talked about baseball and cocaine. He went on Joe Rogan and he talked about, all the celebrities that he was friends with over the years. He just broed out on all of these shows, and people say, how did Trump win the bro vote? He won the bro vote because he is a bro, and he did it really well.
I think there's a point which is you cannot outsmart the combined IQ of the comment section. Yeah. Because the internet has a really strong bullshit detector. Yeah. And Kamala did not go on Joe Rogan. I think she was smart not to go. Yeah. Because she would, her fugaziness would have been just snuffed out immediately, and going 3 hours without peeing. I don't think Trump took a pee break. He was probably the only guy who didn't took a pee break. But,
even I would need one.
Yeah, I was 3 hours. That's crazy. Yeah. But I think there's something to that point. I think Kamala did not go on these podcasts and all of this stuff because she was in my opinion, a uniquely bad candidate, but also not a palatable candidate for the internet. Yeah. Even Alex Cooper said that, hey, her campaign managers and staffers, they were kind of like, hey, let's recreate the set and all of that. Internet does not have any bandwidth for that level of facade.
Yeah, you're right. And I think it's unfortunate too, because this is a woman who ran on a story of being a career prosecutor, of having, to be on the front lines of the most important battles of our lifetime in the history of this country. But yet she can't sit down for 3 hours and explain to why, she deserves to be the next president of the United States. And I think that's when people really realize that the emperor had no clothes. And it's kind of interesting to me because I feel like Joe Biden is so senile that he would have done it. Yeah. His staff may have been like, Joe, please don't. Yeah. But I think even Joe, if he was probably coked up enough that day, would have been like, yes, I'm going to go do Joe Rogan. I'm going to sit here for 3 hours. And, and maybe that would have been the second end of his campaign. But to his credit, I think he would have done it in the same way that, obviously it would have has since proved to be a very fateful decision that he made. He decided he wanted to debate early, which of course gave him the opening to, shove him off the ballot in the most undemocratic way we've ever seen. But yeah, I think you're right. Everyone could see through Kamala Harris's lack of authenticity, everything from the faked accents to, just like, it's so interesting to me because I thought like we would never have a more inauthentic politician after Hillary Clinton went on the Breakfast Club and said she keeps hot sauce in her bag in an attempt to appeal to black voters. But Kamala Harris really, did a doozy, I think, on my perceptions. I really have learned to expect the unexpected because of folks like her.
Staying on the vibe selection, vote, and all of that, there's this narrative right now, which is that people like Andrew Schultz, Tia Vaughn, Logan Paul, they are all quote-unquote useful idiots. Because you can see right now Andrew Schultz and Tia Vaughn, they are speaking out against specific policies of Trump. And what do you think is the role of like new media journalists or podcasters when it comes to interviewing politicians?
Yeah, I think the traditional media is dead. I think people view them as the charlatans that they are, and I think that's the reason that fundamental media trust is just gone into the toilet. And so I think a lot of people do trust voices like Theo Von more and Joe Rogan more and Andrew Schultz more because they realize that a lot of what they have to say is not agenda driven. These are just guys who have real questions that are representative of the audiences that they serve. And so I think that as a Republican and as someone who's been a Republican for a long time and has been in the movement for a long time, I'm weary of like non-Republicans trying to dictate the direction of our party. I think that, there was a binary choice in this election. It was Kamala Harris or Donald Trump. They endorsed President Trump because they knew he was going to be better for our country. We thank them for their support. However, I don't think that we should confuse the fact that they endorse President Trump with the fact that they are conservatives or that they are Republicans. I think if you ask them that question themselves, they would say that they aren't. So I think that we need to make sure that we are ideologically consistent and that we serve the voters that, of course, support us. And I think their questions are valid. But I think that, of course, the president has the broad support of the Republican Party. There was a poll that came out just last week where he has a 90+% approval rating among Republican voters. And so I think that the president probably feels as if he's serving the base that got him to office. And I think that a lot of these folks who are new to the movement, we welcome their concerns. We hear their plight. But at the same time, they have to realize that, the president got to where he was because he's Donald J. Trump. And I think he's going to continue to be that.
How do you think the Capitol Hill media apparatus has opened up to new media? And once again, like there's an argument which is that the only reason people like Caroline Leavitt and White House media is open to new media because new media was kind of sort of responsible to get Trump to where he is circa November. The question is, like, should new media actually do capital J journalism in that room? Because my fear is this can just be a pendulum back and forth. Let's say 4 years later, there's a progressive in the House, and they want people like Hasan Piker in the White House press seat, and they will ask questions which are friendly to that administration. What's new media's role in capital P politics?
Yeah, I think, at the end of the day, I think a lot of people are just over a lot of these, corporate media institutions. And I think they prize a lot more or put a lot more stock in what, influencers are saying and what these new media voices are saying. So I think there's definitely a role for them to play. I think it's going to be one of those things that's just trial and error, right? I think, what room should influencers be in? Which room should they not be in? If you ask many influencers who, held the Epstein binders, if they would make that decision today, they would all unanimously tell you no. And that was one of the decisions where I think that, that was just not the room that they needed to be in or something that they needed to be utilized for. But I think that in terms of having their voices in the briefing room and having them, meet with lawmakers, I think that it's helpful in the sense that because I think that a lot of people want to understand government. And I think that the more that, young Americans understand government, the more that anyone understands government, the better that they can, work the government and put it to work in a way that better serves them in their communities. And so I think that it's going to be trial and error in terms of like how much access they should have, how much they shouldn't. And what I hope, and I think what we've kind of seen from, Caroline Leavitt and the comm staff at the White House is that new media has been very broad. It's not just, Republican influencers, but they've also had Axios in the new media seat. They've had, some other Notice. Jasmine Wright was in the new media seat recently, and there are nonpartisan journalism think tank, of course. So I think there's a broad approach to that. Now, would a Democrat administration be as open to having a DC Drano or a Republican influencer in that seat or a Jack Posobiec? Hell no. But so I
would
think,
love to see that.
No, I would love to see it. I would love to see Jack Posobiec go head to head with a Jen Psaki Light or whoever her ideological successor is. But yeah, I think there will definitely be a double standard in terms of what new media access looks like in the future, but I'm glad to see it. I think it's the future of journalism.
I think like net is a good movement. In my opinion, I'm 29. I've seen, for the longest time, I felt very, very scaffolded by the fact that media isn't moving fast enough, especially because I've worked at Fox, I've worked at Daily Caller. I know what the energy is and the energy of the base, and speaking the language of the internet, news, like new media, especially conservatives, are getting that mostly because they have not been in the room of bigger liberal circles for the longest time. Let's quickly go back to the inauguration night party.
Yeah.
Get as insider baseball as possible.
Yeah.
What went behind putting that together?
So one day I woke up and I was just like, I want to throw a party for inauguration.
Yeah.
And, I was just kind of like, okay, how are we going to figure this out? And, of course, the role that influencers would play in this election, it had been talked about. Many people had called this the influencer election, and I think rightfully so. My role at the RNC during the campaign was co-chair of the RNC Youth Advisory Council. And so a lot of my role kind of consisted of how do we reach young people where they are? And influencers were an indispensable part of that equation. And so we invited them to things like the convention. We invited them to all of the primary debates. And of course, the president invited them, along the way, just to travel with him and cover him on the campaign trail. And so I wanted to kind of honor a lot of those voices that, that we would not be where we are right now with the president in the White House if they had not been a part of this process. And so we called it the Power 30 Awards. So we honored the 30 most impactful influencers from this election cycle. And, I put it together, reached out to TikTok, who were, interested in sponsoring, and, thankful to them for their support. Folks like Call Sheet, they came to the table, they supported us. The American Conservation Coalition, I know it was a mutual friend of ours, they supported the event as well. And honestly, what it became was honestly not expected. Of course, we knew we were going to have a lot of media there. But the New York Magazine reporter, I had no idea that reporter was going to be there. I was not told that reporter was going to be there. So it was kind of interesting, when I saw the story and there was no mention of me. But I think it is clear why there was no mention of me in that story, because the narrative they wanted to perpetuate was that, of course, all of these young MAGA Republicans are some KKK kumbaya. And that is not the case. There were many people of color present. I was the host and the organizer of the event. We had folks like Gervonta Tank Davis, Waka Flocka, Congressman Wesley Hunt, and I'm sure we all look in the mirror every single day. I'm still not white. Maybe Joe Biden thinks that I am, but outside of that, I'm proud and black and all those things and conservative. And so the party, of course, blew up. I saw the New York Magazine article, and I've been working in the conservative movement since I was 12. So it's been a decade. So I'm used to a hit piece. And so I read it, and honestly, I was kind of just like, okay, this is part of the course for a New York Magazine. I didn't realize until it was pointed out by other people online that they had intentionally cropped out black people from the cover of the magazine, and also had put like the headline in a way, because there was one black person in the middle that they could not cover. So they actually just put the title over his head. And I was like, this is absolutely incredible. And I think going back to what you said, it's like the internet's bullshit meter is so refined now. People were like, what in the hell is this? We had folks like Elon Musk, JD Vance, the Mark Andreessen, all of these people who came out and said, what in the hell? Like, you guys still don't understand. Like, this is why people don't trust you. This is why people don't believe you. And what's so funny about this too, I forgot, when I read the article, I reached out to the reporter and I said, hey, like, do you want a comment from me? Do you want like a quote or anything? He said, unfortunately, I ran out of space. Now, you've worked in digital journalism. You've operated WordPress. You can update an article at any time. Like, okay, yeah, it's not going to make it in the print piece. Who the fuck reads that shit anyways? Yeah. And so put it on the website. And even when given the opportunity to do that, he refused, because the narrative was far more important to him to perpetuate the false idea that we were just some racist, exclusionary movement of people who hated all types of minorities, which couldn't be further from the truth.
I think the irony of that, especially in Trump V2, is that a lot of swing did happen for minority voters, Latino voters, black voters. I live in New York. New York swung more than anyone could have ever expected. Yeah. So I think that effort, in my opinion, was kind of sort of a push against what the reality is. Yeah. And it's a hard reality, because I have friends in the liberal circles in New York, in DC, and this year was very different than Trump v1.
Yeah.
Trump v1 felt like, knock on wood, like fucking 9/11
Yeah.
in DC. Like the city was quiet.
Yeah.
Everybody was like, what the fuck just happened?
Yeah.
This year, it was kind of sort of like, okay, yeah, the country was swinging. We did see all these people change their values, and it's kind of sort of like normified.
Yeah.
People can come out. No one is afraid of touching a MAGA hat. I live close to West Village.
Yeah.
We have girls here wearing MAGA hats
Yeah.
now
Yeah.
during last election cycle. So I think, especially given the election cycle we existed in, that story stood out to me.
No, that's such a real point. And I think, comparing Trump v1 versus, this most recent election, it would have been unimaginable a few years ago that TikTok would sponsor a party like the one that
that's
we
the
had,
question. Like
right?
Kalshi was coming up.
Yeah.
Kalshi's like the founder, Tariq, I think his name
Mansour,
is.
yeah.
Yeah, and people like that have like a really strong pulse on
Yeah.
what the internet is, because that's
Yeah.
how they make their money.
Yeah.
TikTok, I was shocked because TikTok is like a giant fucking company.
Yeah.
And them bankrolling an event which proudly boasts all things MAGA,
Yeah.
that stood out to me. How did that come about?
They reached out and, they had gotten kind of wind of the event happening and they were like, let's figure out ways that we can partner on this. And of course, TikTok was an indispensable tool that the president used to reach young voters. You talk about swings, we saw a 20-point swing among voters 18 to 29 in support of the president this past cycle. And that would not have been possible without TikTok. And so when they reached out, I said, of course, let's work together on this because, again, like, that is the new town square. That is where young people are. That's where we're reaching them. And I have this conversation oftentimes with like members of Congress and, folks in the campaign world. I'm like, if you want to reach young voters, you've got to do it on TikTok. Like there's no reason not to be there. We cede an entire landscape to the Dems and we're going to act surprised when they go the other way. No, let's play ball. Let's play because our ideas are better than theirs. And so they reached out and they were interested in being supportive and they continue to be supportive, which, I definitely appreciate. And, but yeah, no, that's just kind of how it happened.
I think to that point that you have to be on TikTok, I think there's a wrong lesson and a right lesson here.
Mm-hmm.
The wrong lesson is, what's the difference? TikTok is just a comms tool. All things new media is just a comms tool.
Yeah.
Whatever you are doing, just do it here.
Yeah.
Instead of going on TV, pick up your phone, ask your comms intern to film a video, and we'll put it out.
Yeah.
I think that's a wrong lesson because people online have a different grammar. They talk differently. They understand differently.
Yeah.
They want to see their issues, be that, I don't know, student debt, be that not being able to afford a house and all of that stuff. Talk about those things. People use the word populist very easily. I don't want to say if it's populist or not.
Yeah.
But young people online care about very, very different things
Yeah.
than people on TV do.
You're right. And it's interesting for me because it's like I do TV a lot,
Yeah.
but also too like I am a digital first kind of
Yeah,
creator.
yeah.
Like I got my start in 2014 before the word influencer was even a thing. I was like still called a vlogger back then. And then influencer became a thing and now influencer is kind of being retired because people think it's so offensive and now it's creator.
Yeah.
And so who knows what I'll be in a
Creator
decade.
economy.
Yeah, who knows what I'll be in a decade? I don't know. Unemployed maybe. But it's one of those things where you're exactly right. I think that every platform is different, and so you've got to figure out the best way to reach the audiences that are on that particular platform.
Yeah.
And I think, one thing that I actually, to give credit to the Dems, there was this one member, Jeff Jackson, who was, now Attorney General of North Carolina, but was formerly a congressman, who basically just kind of gave people a behind the scenes view of how Congress actually worked and operated in a very kind of nonpartisan way. If you watched it, you probably wouldn't have even realized he was a Democrat. And I think that people were surprised by how successful that was, but I'm not. Why? Because Scandal is so successful. House of Cards is so successful.
Yeah.
West Wing is so successful. People really do have an interest in how the government works and how, things can kind of like hit the fan, and because people really just don't know. And so I think that, I think you definitely have to have a pulse on the issues that your audience cares about. But also, too, I think you've got to be radically transparent, which is what I think, the president and his team do really well. Like Margot Martin traveling with the president everywhere and just kind of recording everything. People love that stuff. And I think also, too, to your point, lean on your intern. Like, ask them, what is GenZ actually thinking about? Like, don't read some,
They have the
like,
pulse, yeah.
Right. Don't read some bullshit Pew Research study. Like, I don't even know where they get these numbers from sometimes. I read these stories.
Because I
I'm
never
like,
get a call for these
right,
stories.
I've never gotten a call. I'm like, it's great, great space for an op-ed, like
Yeah.
according to Pew Research. But in terms of actually knowing where young people people are. Ask the people around you. Lean on your young staff. That was the one thing about DC that's been so interesting to me living here for a year, is that our government is quite literally ran by 20-year-olds, and it's so interesting to me. And it probably explains a lot, but it's just one of those things where it's like the brain trust is there. You gotta just trust the people that you've brought on to help you.
I still am fascinated by how the space changed, kind of sort of felt overnight. I moved into the city during Kavanaugh.
Yeah.
I still remember the Covington kids happening and how, I don't want to say hard, how shocking it was for people to realize that, oh, the right can actually talk back online. I think my friend Robbie Suave broke the story in Reason Magazine, the fact that, hey, this didn't happen. This is the actual truth. And he used the blog to communicate that. Today, people on right, they actually are taking over the steering wheel of the narrative and doing it in a not cringe way.
Yeah.
I'm still so shocked by it because I remember the days where if you said Ben Shapiro, people thought that you're watching talk radio.
Yeah.
Right? So, because at the end of the day, it kind of did feel like, oh, it's just talk radio on Facebook.
Yeah.
Right? But today, it's part of the culture.
Yeah. No, we've come such a long way, and I think, again, it's indicative of the fact that, like, honestly, for a long time, it's so interesting when I talk to reporters about this, because they're like, where did these influencers come from? Or like, have they always been here? And I'm like, literally, yeah. The right has always had a lot more influencers, because like we realized a long time ago that we were never going to find our heroes in Hollywood. So we had to make our own celebrities. We had to make our own newscasters and talking heads and all of these things. And so we always had kind of a little bit of an edge. The problem is that the right, being so individualistic and, you know, anti-collectivist and all of these things, we don't always talk to one another. Right. We don't work together, which is a problem. And so I think
I'm thinking about this. Like, tell me if you agree with this.
Yeah.
Because the right was shunned out of all of these cultural elite rooms, they had to figure out their own ways.
Yeah.
So they were forced to be creative and be better at finding their audience online.
Exactly.
And it wasn't top down. It was ground up.
Yeah.
It just happened to be that after all of these years, the dam kind of broke because of, I want to say COVID, I want to say, I don't know, NFL players dancing, MAGA, and all of that stuff. And now all of this came together.
No, you're right. And also too, just look at the trajectory of the movement. It's like, I remember when IJR became a thing, right? And they were doing those videos like Benny Johnson, and they were making like Machine Gun Bacon and all of these things, right? So there's so many, I think, like trial and error things.
I know. I used to work
with
with Benny, like before Benny Johnson was a big Twitter page.
Yeah.
And people like that were super creative.
Yeah.
We used to make videos of like waltz across America and go and film outside Obama's office, Obama's house, showing that he actually has a fence.
Yeah.
So we were always like creative, like how can we communicate the message here online in a funny and authentic way?
Yeah.
And that energy was always there.
Yeah. And also, how do we break through the censorship at that time, right?
My God,
Because it's like, not only were we having, you know, forced to be creative because we weren't, you know, we didn't have these crazy budgets like, you know, they did on the left, like, and the access to VC money and all of these things, like, you know, and now this had or whatever. You were forced to be creative, but also too, like, how could you approach the line enough where like you're still communicating your point about whatever you want to talk about and not get banned and lose your entire livelihood? And so, you know, thankfully, I think a lot of these big tech, you know, companies have been forced to kind of play ball now because they realize like this president does not give a damn. Like if you go after him and his supporters, like he's going to come after you 10 times harder. And so I think that's why we've seen the kind of readjustment in their approach to how they deal with conservative creators and just conservative news. And it's like, I don't need amplification. I just want a fair shot at, you know, my message getting out there and all of those things. It's like, and for a long time, we didn't have that. And what's interesting too, is like, I'm friends with, you know, a few progressive influencers and they tell me now that like, we feel shadow banned. I'm like, go to hell. I'm like, this is like the craziest thing in the world. I'm like, but it's so interesting too to see. It's like when people are in the minority, what's happening, right? When we were pushed into the shadows, we became entrepreneurial. We created the alternative economy. We created the parallel economy, all these things. The left is absolutely floundering. They have no idea. Every single day, you read a new article about how they are rudderless, directionless, all of these things. They think, oh, Cory Booker spoke for 23 hours. This is the way that we get back to the White House. Who listened to that speech? I certainly don't know a single person who did. That is a normal person and who doesn't like work on the Hill or, you know, follows Resist America Instagram accounts, right? And so like, it's so interesting seeing them like not be able to figure out like how to actually be entrepreneurial in this time. And it's because they've always had it so easy, right?
I think another point there is that how media is reacting to kids and TikTokers and influencers coming out as conservative. Because the narrative there is that there is no way this can be a ground up movement. Trump gained it by going on podcasts and convincing all of these 20-something dudes to wear a MAGA hat. And I was like, no. This energy was always there. It just did not see the face of the internet because y'all did not allow us to talk about this.
No, you're exactly right. And like and that's why I think it's so interesting. If going back to the New York Magazine article, you could tell that this person had never even like hung out with Republicans before. You could tell they had never hung out with conservatives. Like you could read the disdain in every sentence as he described.
Even the way the photos are taken.
You could see it. Like they just genuinely hated these people, and they could not believe that how dare they like Donald Trump? How dare they wear a MAGA hat? And how dare they be happy to be in an event celebrating the inauguration of the president they supported and voted for? And I think that's why the media missed the moment in 2016, and they missed the cultural moment that we're in right now. Like, this cultural moment has like turned JoJo Siwa straight again. Like, this is like, how are we ignoring this stuff right now? Like, this is so interesting. Today I saw a picture of Scotty Scheffler. His baby was, crawling on the golf course, and Nike came out with a social post that said, "You already won," talking about how being a father is the ultimate prize and goal. A year ago,
in 2016,
no one would have ever imagined such a thing.
If this went out on 2016, people will call Nike Christian propaganda.
Yeah, exactly. Christian nationalist propaganda, perpetuating the idea that people need to give their life away and reproduce and all these things. But now it's just like, it is the norm. And I am so glad to see it, because for a long time, you're right. Like, it's like you had these people who treated us as if we truly were like second-class citizens, that we believed in the worst things in the world. It's like, no, my political beliefs are like, I support a limited government. I don't think you should trans a child. I don't think that, biological men should be playing women's sports. These things are not controversial when you go talk to real people. When you leave your New York City newsroom and you leave your apartment in Chelsea and you actually go to Alabama, Georgia, and real America, Texas even, which is becoming more and more purple by the day, as they import illegal aliens into our country. Like, you actually hear, even actually when you talk to those illegal aliens, you think they support transing children as they come from their Catholic countries?
That writer from Chelsea does not need to go all the way to the Midwest or the South. They just need to go and talk to normal people in New York City who don't live in Bushwick. I live in New York City. There are a lot of people who are always, what is going on? I live 5 minutes away from Roosevelt Hotel. I know exactly what's going on. But the point is, there were always these quote-unquote normal people who were questioning the norm and the permission structure, the permission ticket, I think you said, that changed. And that was one of the biggest things. To the thing you said about IGR, it reminded me, because I very vividly remember Facebook changing their algorithm and rules overnight, and businesses like IGR going away just like that, because they cannot build a business off of referral clicks. And today you see Mark Zuckerberg bro coding out, wearing a gold chain, a black t-shirt, taekwondo, jiu-jitsu, all of that. My question is, having existed in conservative circles, do you think that VC class, that tech class, the Elon Musk archetype, let's call it, do you think they fundamentally believe in anything?
That's a great question. That is a really good question. I think that they realize that the left is so, I think there is no room for error on the left. There is no room for individual thought. There is no room for dissent. And I think that when you are so used to being so innovative and breaking things very quickly and just to get to point A to point B, you have to have dissent. You have to have someone who's willing to, ask questions that are uncomfortable and, just to advance society. And I think that's how they made their billions. That's how they became the innovators that they are. And they realized that, like, why shouldn't that apply to politics? Like, why should I be able to ask a question about whether or not maybe, is it a good idea that biological men play women's sports? Is it a good idea that, we teach young black children that they're perpetual victims and young white children that they are responsible for oppression that they were not alive themselves to have ever even committed? And so I think that them getting to this point makes sense, right? Because these are people who ask questions. These are people who take risk. And that is just not something that's allowed on the left anymore. You're not allowed to be a free thinker. And so I think that is why they've come over to our side. But I also think that we should hold them accountable, right? Like, again, I go back to the thing where it's like, welcome to the party, but you're a guest, right? You're like, you're not the host, you're not the organizer, and this is not your home. You are a guest. And maybe one day you'll throw a party and we'll come to your party. But right now it's
how do you make them feel acclimated? Because that in that sentiment, it does sound a little bit defensive. I do understand the sentiment and where you're coming from, especially because I get that a lot personally. And I'm not pushing back on your sentiment, by the way. I moved to America 10 years ago from the UK. And my experience in the conservative circle has always been that of people were always nice to me and welcomed me, but there were always a group of people who, treated me like, hey, you are just a guest. And my pushback has been that I have believed in these things. I used to be liberal. And a lot of things happen in my life, which is why I'm saying the things that I'm saying. I'm working in the movement that I am and all of that. So what is that thread that needs to be nailed?
I think a lot of the ideas that they perpetuated in terms of like, AI, helping people actually understand that is super helpful. Why? Because for a long time it's like you probably remember this too. It's like when Orrin Hatch was having iconic Senate committee hearing with Mark Zuckerberg testifying. He said, how do you make money? And then Mark is like, we sell advertisements, sir. And so I think having them in these rooms is really critical, especially when you look at, all the big policy issues that are defining right now, crypto even. It's like we need that brain trust in these conversations. But when it comes to immigration, and the visa debate and all of those things, I think that they obviously have financial motivators when it comes to that. And the base of the party did not vote for that, right? Like the people that have been in the trenches for the president, with the president since 2016, did not vote for that. They voted for America First policies. And so I think that what they should expect is like, we'll probably take 50% of your ideas. We'll take 75% of your ideas. But just because you gave X amount of dollars to the president in his campaign doesn't mean you get to remake the Republican Party into what you believe it should be wholesale.
I think limiting factor is a really key point there. Like, what exactly are you prioritizing your whole spiel for? That's a really important discussion. I host events in New York City for legal skilled immigrants who are building companies. One of the questions that I always get asked, and it comes as a pushback because I do say things which are uncomfortable, especially in New York City immigrant founder tech circles. My counter has always been that, hey, people always say America is a nation of immigrants. I'm pretty sure you can define what an immigrant is. You have to also be able to define what is a nation. And if you can define that, then you're prioritizing the word nation and America, and then everything else that you do is in service to that. More often than not, the pushback which MAGA and the right, and the new right specifically, has towards all things Elon archetype is that you're not prioritizing America, you're prioritizing you. And as it turned out, that MAGA V2 was a useful vehicle for you to move into our house. And that has been one of the biggest pushback. My question to you regarding this, since we're talking about like boundary setting, I don't know if you saw this Jubilee interview with Medhi Hasan.
I saw a few clips.
Some of them obviously were kind of wild. Some of them was like, what is this? I think I was inspired by people like Teddy Roosevelt, Ronald Reagan, people who actually set what the conservative agenda is. And I totally know that how much that has been malleable and how much different that is today. My question is that, like, in my opinion, if the MAGA movement doesn't define what the movement is, there will always be room for people like that. Maybe some welcome it, maybe some don't. What are the proper guardrails around MAGA, especially for the younger people?
I saw a few of those clips. Ironically enough, I was supposed to be on that episode.
I remember your Vice days. You crushed it.
So fun.
And I was like, why the fuck was he not there?
I know. I was supposed to be on that episode, but then I had a family thing come up, and now I'm looking at the episode. I'm like, thank God. I think, it's one of those things where it's like, it's kind of the consequence of just being chronically online. And I think that, I hate seeing clips like that because I think that
it does a disservice to the movement.
It does a disservice to the movement because, like, Jubilee is an incredible cultural force. And I think that a lot of people I think I did my first Jubilee episode when I lived out in LA, which was like, 2 years ago.
Yeah.
And I had no idea. Like, so many of my normie friends, apolitical, even, they're like, I love watching Jubilee. They're like, I can't believe you're on there. And I had never heard of it.
Yeah.
And so knowing that audience and how big and impactful it is, it does worry me that this will be some folks' first introduction to conservatism.
Yeah.
Because I don't think that we are a movement that is fundamentally racist. I don't think we're a movement that is fundamentally exclusionary. I think that we welcome people who come here wanting to advance our national interests. I think the point that you made is like, in that statement, what's more important to you? And probably is the difference between a conservative and a liberal at this point, right? Is the nation part more important in that sentence, or is the immigrants part more important? I think a nation is obviously, I think it includes having like a shared cultural identity, and an appreciation for the things that make America America, appreciation for faith, family, hard work, all of those things. If you come to this country in support and pursuit of those things, then we welcome you here. If you come to this country to make it into the third world cesspool that you fled, then go back home. And so that is the way that I present that. You look at that clip from Jubilee, it's like they're just telling him to go back home, which we have disagreements at the end of the day, but I think at the end of the day, like, a part of being in America is having those disagreements and having that intellectual debate. As far as the guardrails go, I think that
my
they
feel
should be
is
created by
that
the
if
people.
there are no guardrails,
Yeah.
like a lot of these people who do this just for the edgelording part, they will get to define what the movement is.
Yeah, but I think that a lot of these people are outnumbered, right? It's like maybe they're overrepresented in like the way the algorithms work these days, unfortunately, which is like, I love that X has become like such a great place for free speech, but I will say that the monetization structure needs to be reevaluated. Like, you just have all of these people who just say these fundamentally reprehensible things now just because they know it's going to get engagement, and in turn it's going to help them pay their rent that month. They should diversify their portfolio of income, and like, instead of just being terrible. And so it's like, that's the thing. It's like, how do we actually create those guardrails? I don't know. I don't even think people are mainstreaming these ideas. I think obviously the Jubilee clip is doing that, is platforming these people, and of course it's YouTube,
not a platforming argument, by the way. I'm not saying they should platform, because I now know what they talk about and believe in. I've always known that because I live on Twitter. But now, the discourse was fascinating. The debate is always fascinating. My fear, and I think you echoed it, is that this will be a lot of normies' first impression of the new right-wing bro movement, which pushed Trump for a victory.
And it's like, and these people too, it's like, I'm just as worried about, tech bros overexerting themselves as I am these people overexerting themselves. It's like, because we fundamentally agree about immigration and all of these things, but like, I don't care if someone is in an interracial couple. Like, that is the least of my priorities. And so it's just, I don't know, like, the guardrail question is really interesting because I just don't know how you establish them. I think it's like, I think you got to obviously push back. And I think like maybe that's what I would have done if I were in that room. I'm like, okay, like, we may agree at the end of this is that like, we want to make sure that we maintain our cultural identity as a nation. But the way they talk about this issue is not the way that I talk about this issue, right? And so I think it's like the best way to push back against bad examples of conservatism is to put forth good ones. And I think that's the only way to like actually establish those guardrails.
I think like the guardrails, I really like to go back to that because you saw how the LGBT movement kind of sort of got hamstrung because a lot of the conversation from the LGBT to the LGBT. Yeah. And even a lot of people in that movement were like, this is a lot to deal with. And the conversation went from what are Americans, because the conversation pre-marriage was that all we are asking from you, the American, is to be tolerant. Yeah. And then the conversation changed. Just like, oh no, you have to act this way. Yeah. Be that pronouns, be that all of stuff. And that happened because they did not set good guardrails. Yeah. I don't want that happening.
No, that's a fair concern. It's like, I remember when, the gay marriage debate was just happening, and I had just started in politics. I was 12, 13 years old. And so like, I would guess I was progressive on the issue. Yeah. I was like, if gay people want to get married, let them get married. Who cares? And I'm a Christian, and grew up in the Deep South, all of these things, and like I still believe that. But many social conservatives at the time said this is a slippery slope. Yeah. If we let them get married, the next thing you know, we're gonna have polygamy and all of these things. And while those things did not come to be, we did have a movement where there are people trying to transition their children, that are trying to mutilate the genitals of toddlers. And we have people who are now making the argument with a straight face that biological men should be able to, beat the crap out of women and in women's boxing matches. Like it's absolutely crazy. And it's truly representing the upside down. And I think because of that lunacy becoming mainstream on their side and, women kind of being, just kind of replaced. It's like you look at the Dylan Mulvaney's and all these people, and even like the Miss Universe competition, like owned by a transgender man, all these things. I think normal women are just like, wait, what the hell? Like my culture is not your, or my gender is not your costume or whatever. Right. And so I think, yeah, you're right. I think we do have to be quick to say these people do not represent what we stand for when they do go too far. Because again, as you say, and then maybe it's kind of by intention. Maybe the reason that they are platforming these people or giving them these attention is because they want people's first introduction to conservatism to be in that type of way, which is probably the most strategic thing that the left has probably done. So credit to them, they're learning. But I don't know. It's like, you're right. I think we've got to be cognizant of the fact that like if we don't promote our good ideas 10x to what the left is trying to promote as what conservatism supposedly is, we will lose the ground that we have been able to attain.
My last question to you is, how did you convince Waka Flocka and Souja Boy to come to your MAGA parties?
Well, they love a good rager, and I throw ragers. Many people in this town, they throw receptions. People in DC will throw a reception
to Sunrose. Policy walk receptions at Gaylord. Yeah.
They're like, they'll throw a reception to Sunrose, right? I'm like, no. I don't throw receptions. I throw parties. And because and the reason I do that, right, is because number one, everyone's already doing the reception. Yeah. Everyone's coming. They lure you in with an open bar and you hear a speech from a senator or a congressman, and it's the same thing every single time, right? But I think that like what I really am eager to do is to build community for people in cities that don't have that for conservatives often, right? Because I think that courage is contagious, right? When you have other young people who, are unapologetically standing on what they believe in and are saying, I refuse to live in the shadows anymore. I refuse to be othered in this country where I just won the popular vote, where I just won the electoral college. And we are the moment right now. We are vying for cultural dominance. We are attaining cultural dominance. Then I think you lead to, implications across the board that are good for the country. Why? Because I think what I'm interested in doing is taking this on the road, right? And going to states like Georgia, which is going to have a very critical Senate election and also a governor's race on the ballot. If we can bring young professionals to these parties who probably are still registered to vote, in their home states and get them registered to vote in their swing state where it actually will matter, we can help swing an election. We can help actually organize this and turn this not only into a cultural moment, but a political power play. In terms of how I got Souja Boy and Waka Flocka, funny enough, when I was 13 years old, I got into a Twitter fight with Offset. And he was talking about how he was just like, how much he loved abortion, all these things. And so I replied to him, I said, of course you love abortion. You cheat on your wife every other day. And then me and him kept going back and forth and whatnot. And it went viral. Like Daily Mail wrote about it. Shade Room wrote about it, all these things. Waka Flocka saw it. And he DM'd me on Instagram. It was like midnight. And I looked at my Instagram from Waka Flocka, who I grew up listening to, No Hands, Grove Street Party, all the things. And I'm like, holy shit. And he's like, hey, little bro, it's Big Flocka. I'm here for you always. And he sent me his phone number, sent me his email, and we've stayed in touch ever since. And so when I was like, I'm throwing this party and, we were able to get, great, sponsors and whatnot, I was like, we got to have like a good act for this. And so I hit him up. Immediately was down. Of course, he was supportive of the president during the campaign, so it was kind of a no-brainer. Yeah. And he killed it and he rocked it. And when the New York Magazine story came out, he was like, what the fuck? He's like, was I not there, CJ? And I was like, that's incredible. And then with Souja, again, he performed at the Crypto Ball, during the president's inauguration. And I think people really like these throwbacks. Like the kind of the throwback artists. It's
the
a little
bit
bit
booty mix parties.
Right. It's like nostalgic for a lot of people. And it's like, it's something for like Gen Z can relate to, but also the millennials get to have a little fun too. I'm running out of them. So I'm like, who's next? Snoop Dogg? I don't know. But it's like, it's been super fun to see. And I think it's also too, again, we're doing something super different. It's like, I'm not opposed to doing country like one day. Like, I think it would be cool to do. But I think it's just it's another thing that makes the reporters, when they come, be like, oh my God, all of these like MAGA people are so excited to hear from this rapper.
Keith, what else is new?
How is this possible? I thought they hated hip hop. Oh my God. And so I just love, like, I love to troll, but I also, again, the cultural implications of it is like, yeah, even rappers are okay with wearing a MAGA hat now. Even rappers are okay with performing for a bunch of people that work for the president of the United States, that work for Republican, Congress members. Because it's like, I don't lie to them when I text them about these things. I tell them straight up, because the worst thing that could happen is if I promote this event as like, this person's coming, and they get like all this blowback, and they're like, okay, now I can't come. Which is, a point to that is that I remember when Mike Cernovich and all those people would throw these parties, and venues would cancel on them. Venues would be like, sorry guys, like, contract canceled. They would have to sue them, all these things. It's never happened to me. And it's not because I'm special. It's because of the cultural moment that we're in. All these people realize now that, like, okay, we can either ignore these people and also ignore their check, or we can just welcome them to our doors and just be normal people. And to their credit, like, every venue we worked with has always been great, even in DC. Every team, every like artist, manager, all these things. We had Kodak Black at another party in February. Like, they've all been so gracious. And I think, again, they feel as if like cancel culture is dead. Or at least it's, certainly on its last leg. It's on life support for sure. And yeah, so it's an incredible thing to see and a great thing to be a part of.
I think a good way to end it is the good old Michael Jordan quote. Republicans buy sneakers too.
Yeah. It's we are so back, and we've never been more back. So
thanks, CJ. Appreciate the time.
Thanks for having me.